With the conclusion of the Young Stars Classic this weekend, I think for Vancouver Canucks fans, this has been a really good opportunity for all of us to acknowledge, witness, and just kind of breathe in how good some of the Canucks prospects really are. Now, this prospect tournament was kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, some of the top-tier talents of guys on other teams are definitely, quote-unquote, better prospects than what the Vancouver Canucks have in their prospect pool. I'd think that the top prospect the Canucks have, in terms of potential and long-term projectability, is probably Jonathan Lekkerimaki. Considering the guys the Canucks had at their tournament, they didn't have Tom Willander, he wasn't an option for them, so Lekkerimaki was the best prospect. He's the guy with the highest ceiling, and he did have one of the better tournaments. However, the top prospect in Vancouver, I'd say he's not as good as a Brad Lambert, for example, in Winnipeg. He doesn't have the same star power potential like a Zane Parekh in Calgary. So while the Canucks did not have the top-tier prospect pool heading into the tournament, I'd say, they definitely had the oldest group, which, for better or for worse, helped them out, winning games and using their experience to kind of dominate over some of the other teams. I think Calgary's average age was like 18, 19 years old. Vancouver's was 23. I saw somebody saying that elsewhere on Twitter. Don't know if it's 100% true, though, but just looking at the names of the guys, you could definitely see that Vancouver's team was a lot older, and that's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, you want to get excited about the prospects winning. At the other hand, I mean, it is a prospects tournament, so this is not going to indicate the exact future to be. And at the same time, the Canucks prospects being older means that they have less room to grow heading into the next few years than some of the guys that are 18 years old flat. So it is kind of an interesting idea to talk about when it comes to Canucks prospects at this tournament, but what I wanted to do was go over to Reddit, read some of the comments on this post. Very Last Chance asked this yesterday: which prospects impressed the most at the Young Stars Classic? I wasn't able to catch any of the games, but it looks like we did well. Who stood out? And the top comment goes over the names that I think everybody who is watching the tournament could agree with. Other than the top line of Lekkerimaki, Raty, and Bains, I'm impressed with Alriksson and Sasson. Both were play drivers, and both of them worked hard on pucks. On the blue line, I really like Kudryavtsev and D. Petey. Let's start with those guys. So, the top line, Lekkerimaki, Bains, and Aatu, they had so much chemistry. They worked together. It's like, yeah, you could tell they played in Abbotsford for a good chunk of last season together. Arshdeep Bains is an absolute workhorse, which is totally expected because he was dominant at the AHL level. Didn't have the best NHL stint, but he was still utilizing his hockey smarts and his ability to drive the play forward. There were a few plays in the last game that we caught where Bains was kind of falling down, and while he was falling down, he was still making a breakout pass or setting up a guy on the side there. He is just really good at this, and I think a lot of Canucks fans are going to be expecting bigger and better things out of Bains over the next few years. And considering the fact that Bains is 23, I think if there's a time for him to establish himself as an NHL project, a guy who could play middle to bottom 6 minutes at the NHL level, it would have to come sometime in the next year and a bit in order for us to really fully believe that it's a possibility out of him and his game. He's great at the AHL level and he dominated in this tournament, but he is getting up there in age, and I do think there's a little bit more work that needs to be done before he's able to carry that over into the next level. Aatu, I think, definitely had himself a good tournament as well. He's one of these guys that, I mean, he was supposed to be first overall back in 2021's NHL Draft, so the fact that he is now a Vancouver Canucks prospect is pretty great, and his ability to just kind of take control of the middle, move around, make some nice plays, make some very transitory plays. He kind of reminds me of BMO a little bit, Brendan Morrison. I don't know if that's a comparison that a lot of people will vibe with, but just kind of, he makes the right play. He's able to progress forward and he meshes well with some guys with talent on his wings, like Jonathan Lekkerimaki, whom we're going to talk about later. But for Raty, long term, I do think there's a lot more to give for him, especially since he did have that season of being a first overall caliber player all those years ago. That's not going to happen anymore, I think, but if he's able to round himself out as a middle six kind of center with some penalty killing and power play too capabilities, then I think the Canucks are happy with getting this guy back in the Bo Horvat trade. Of course, though, they also got Filip Hronek in a sense too, but either way, Raty, I think, is a pretty good prize. Not to mention Jonathan Lekkerimaki, whom the Vancouver Canucks drafted in the 2022 NHL Entry Draft. The guy was unleashing one-timers like crazy, which is not a surprise. That is the guy's bread and butter when it comes to his hockey playing effectiveness. He's the youngest out of these three on the top line, and I think Lekkerimaki definitely has the highest ceiling out of all the Vancouver Canucks prospects right now. If you're looking at a 25-goal consistent guy over the next 10 years or so, you're really happy with that. At 15th overall, you can't really do much better than a guy who can just absolutely clap bombs and do stuff to moms whilst on that power play OV spot. Not to mention his playmaking, which did take a step up as well. Lekkerimaki was just so strong in this tournament, and I really did like what we had seen. Same thing could be said about Alriksson and Sasson. Sasson on the second line there kind of had a similar impact to Aatu, but maybe with a bit more direction. I'd say that Sasson was kind of like the best center on the team based off of the footage that I'd seen, but like, of course, Max Sasson is 24 years old, so he's kind of got a little bit less time than the rest of these players to fully establish himself as an NHL project. I mean, he'll be great in the AHL. He was an AHL rookie last season after all. This is only his second pro year doing the thing. But long term, if you want to say that he's an NHL guy, his time is running out, I would say, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's always valuable to have players that can play meaningful AHL minutes, and Max Sasson is definitely going to do that next season. The other guy that was mentioned, Vilmer Alriksson, is younger. He's only 19, but he's huge. And there's a little bit of Dakota Joshua in his game, honestly. Not to mention the fact that he had scored 2 goals in the tournament in the last 2 games. They used him on the power play as well. He's a big, intimidating force out there. And if he's really able to hone out those skills that separate him from the rest, use his size to his advantage, use his reach, we could be looking at some sort of a discount Elmer Soderblom, I'd say. Then going over onto the defense, Kudryavtsev is just a smart guy, poised guy. I liked him a lot. And DPD, Elias Pettersson makes some really good plays. He's good in the offensive zone. He scored a goal, whipped a puck on goal from long range, and he makes some good passes as well. Not to mention the scrappy nature of his overall game. Cam Robinson was already talking about this like a year ago, saying that Elias Pettersson, the defenseman that is, can get really aggressive onto his opponents, and that certainly is something that I think the Canucks blue line will be lacking with the departure of guys like Nikita Zadorov and Ian Cole. There still are some guys on the team now that can fight, can step up for their guys. Vinny Desharnais, Derek Forbort, they're no slouches, but Elias Pettersson has a pretty interesting opportunity to provide that as well as legitimate offense too. A lot of the other comments here on the subreddit go out there and mention some of the same names, Alriksson, DPD, Sasson, and then of course the Lekkerimaki, Bains, and Aatu pairing. But there's another comment here that talks about Anthony Romani, how he had looked slow in the first game but came alive in the second and third. He always seemed to be in the right spot to create scoring chances, and his shot looked lethal. Another reply says here, watched Romani heavily in the OHL, and he is incredibly smart. His release is fantastic, and his hockey IQ is through the roof. If he gets a little more physical and aggressive on the forecheck this year, he will be a weapon. Not the best skater, but the IQ makes up for it. I find him similar to Draisaitl at a lower level. And Anthony Romani, the game that we had seen where he scored the goal, that shot was a lightning bolt. Man, the guy had the puck on the side. He initially fanned on his opportunity, but then he picked it up and just rifled it by his goaltender there. And I say his goaltender because the goaltender on the opposing team was his own teammate from the OHL. But Romani, he's got a really interesting profile too. Maybe not the best skater, maybe not the best physical guy, but somebody with a lot of tools who, if everything goes right, could make it work at the NHL level. I mean, it's not every day you see a guy absolutely explode in the OHL and become #1 in goals overnight, right? Anthony Romani kind of did that, so this certainly is one of the more intriguing prospects as well. Overall, though, I'd say what we had learned out of the Vancouver Canucks Young Stars Classic team was that there are some legitimate underdog talents that could be making their way soon into the Vancouver Canucks system with a spark. Whether or not that means NHL projectability long term, who knows? I'd say out of the guys we had talked about, it's probably a disappointment if Lekkerimaki and maybe to an extent Aatu don't become full-time NHL players sometime soon. Lekkerimaki is like the only guaranteed one, though, where it's like, yeah, if he does not become an NHL player and he's not good enough to do that, then we're disappointed. But everybody else, I mean, if Vilmer Alriksson never becomes an NHL player, okay, that's fine. If Max Sasson never becomes an NHL player, okay, that's fine. There are a lot of guys here whom I think many Canucks fans don't really think are going to be guaranteed NHL guys, but there are a lot of guys who could be NHL guys if everything goes right, if their development continues to go down this path. And that, I think, is a really good thing to pick up from this tournament. I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on the prospects we had seen, and who do you think stood out to you in a positive way? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.